Hello and welcome to Silver Age Silver Screen, a podcast where we watch, discuss, and review film adaptations of comics, anime, video games, and other stereotypically geeky works. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarmes.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe.
You know, before we get into it, I've got some beef with Disney, and they're having $30 to watch Black Widow, even if you have Disney Plus when it comes out in November. It just makes me so angry. I feel like I'm gonna lose control and smash.
Is that official? Are they actually putting it on Disney Plus now, or?
I was mostly just doing that as a joke to introduce. We're talking about the Hulk, but yeah, they're doing that. Feel so angry. Want smash skin green. We're talking about the Hulk. Okay.
That was a very great segue.
Yes, it was completely fluid and natural.
Absolutely.
More specifically, we are talking about the portrayal of Hulk in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, played by Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo taking over after one movie and doing a better job, but we'll get into that. This isn't going to be a typical review type thing for us. I mean, it's not a review, but this is how I think we're going to do this, is go through the 6 films that star the Hulk in the MCU, discuss Hulk's role in them, and give our thoughts. Hulk's appeared in 6 Marvel movies in the past 12 years. I would say only one of which is a good Hulk movie. There are 3 okay Hulk movies, 2 bad Hulk movies, and also he had cameos in 2 other ones.
Right.
But we'll get into that. Let's just jump right in. Let's describe Hulk's appearance in the only film that actually starred him, The Incredible Hulk. So basically, Incredible Hulk, it opens up. It doesn't give Hulk's backstory, which is something that I kind of like when they don't do superhero backstories for superheroes who have had their backstories done a million times. Hulk is already on the run. We see a couple short flashbacks, but basically, Bruce Banner's backstory is did some experimentation on him to recreate Captain America's powers. Oops, experiment went wrong. Killed 3 people on the run. Also, he turns into a giant green anger monster and smashes stuff. When Incredible Hulk begins, he's in Brazil, laying low, studying martial arts to control his anger.
Yes, Bruce Banner is a genius scientist studying the effects of gamma radiation on the human body. When an accident leaves him with his dual personality, there's him, and then whenever his blood pressure reaches a certain level, just due to adrenaline or being angry, he turns into this homicidal, brainless monster that just destroys and smashes, and there's just destruction everywhere he goes. And that is the backstory of the Incredible Hulk. That's where we find Bruce Banner, and he is on the run from the U.S. government, predominantly the Hulkbuster units, led by Colonel Thunderbolt, or is it Colonel Thunderbolt Ross?
General, actually.
Led by General Thunderbolt Ross. Ross has created a task force predominantly to hunt the Hulk and Bruce Banner down, bring him to justice for his crimes against humanity.
Those crimes that, Thaddeus Ross created with him messing around with Bruce's experiments to create super soldiers, but whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bruce Banner, when his first appearance in the MCU starts up, he's been Hulk for a couple years. He's trying to figure out how to cure himself. He's hiding out in Brazil when he cuts himself in a factory and poisons Stan Lee. And that causes the army to know where he is. They go to Brazil. They send a group of soldiers led by a guy named Emil Blonsky, who is way too into killing the Hulk for his own good. Hulk escapes them, and he heads back to the U.S., where Bruce Banner meets up former love of his life, Betty Ross.
The daughter of General Thunderbolt Ross, the man hunting him down.
Yeah, who helped him with his experiments before they went wrong. The two hang out for a bit. They have some meet-cute stuff. Hulk faces off with the military a bit. Eventually, Bruce meets up with, What's his name?
The leader?
Stern. Samuel Stern. In the comics, he's the leader. They didn't do that in the films, though, even though they set it up. But he meets up with another scientist named Samuel Stern and tries to fix his Hulk powers. And it doesn't work, unfortunately. And also, Emil Blonsky, that guy who really wants to catch Hulk, ends up forcing Stern to turn him into a Hulk, a more evil version of Hulk called Abomination. And then Blonsky destroys Harlem, and Ross lets Hulk go so he can go fight Blonsky. They fight in Harlem. It's actually a pretty good scene. Hulk beats the crap out of Abomination and then just kind of goes north to Alaska and chills there for a while.
Yep, yeah, that sounds about right. And that's the end of The Incredible Hulk. And by the end of the film, we can see that Bruce Banner has somewhat gained control over the Hulk.
That's something that we should really hone in while discussing this. The relationship between Bruce and Hulk, and as it changes over time.
Exactly.
At the start of Incredible Hulk, Bruce sees the Hulk as a sickness, something he needs to get rid of. He's searching for a cure, and this is, I'm pretty sure, the only time in the MCU he is searching for a cure. But at the end of the movie, he is forced to rely on Hulk's strength to defeat Abomination. At the end of the film, he starts thinking of Hulk as something he can control, something that can be used for good, albeit something that is still very, very dangerous.
Absolutely. And then the next time we see the Hulk is 4 years later in the 2012 film The Avengers, where he is played by a different actor this time because Edward Norton, A, he was not too pleased with the final product that was the Incredible Hulk film, and B, he did not want to be attached to a franchise. So he basically stepped down and said, I did not want to be a part of a cinematic universe. Instead, they recast the role as actor Mark Ruffalo. We find him in India, where he is treating the sick and basically doing what he can to help people. Eventually, Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., sends Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow, to incorporate him into the new Avengers program.
Before we go too far into Avengers, because I have a lot of thoughts on it, what are your thoughts on Hulk's portrayal in The Incredible Hulk?
I'm going to get this out right away. I do think that The Incredible Hulk is one of the weaker films of the MCU.
I would straight up say it's the worst film in the MCU.
I would say it's one of the worst. Big factor in is, yes, in terms of like the filmmaking at hand, yeah, I have a lot of flaws with it, as well as the story. Also, it just doesn't lead to anything. You mentioned, I believe, Samuel Stearns earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They teased him at the end of the film. He was, I believe, infected with gamma radiation, and you see his head expanding and morphing, and he's turning into the leader, who is a character who's got green skin and a huge head. That's predominantly his look. And you see he's got a big smile on his face. So they were teasing him as a villain of the potential next Hulk film. But they actually ended up writing that off as, oh no, he died like a minute later.
After they made The Incredible Hulk, Marvel got bought out by Disney, but the distribution rights for Hulk films were still owned by Universal, so They don't want to make any more Hulk films because they would lose a big chunk to Universal.
Exactly.
Because of that, there wasn't any sequel to The Incredible Hulk.
Right.
The Incredible Hulk is the only standalone Hulk film we ever see. Setting aside it not going anywhere and its plot just being okay, I don't think it has a bad portrayal of Hulk.
No, not at all.
The Incredible Hulk is probably the MCU movie where Hulk is the most monstrous, the most mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
The film does start out with him as just this horror character.
Exactly.
As it goes on, it does start to show that there's more to Hulk and there's a bit of Banner still in him.
Right, exactly.
There are two moments in particular that I really like about Hulk's portrayal in The Incredible Hulk. There's a scene when he's like on the run with Betty where it's a storm outside and you see Hulk just like screaming at the thunder because he thinks it's a threat and doesn't really understand it. And that scene is a really good portrayal that Hulk isn't so much evil as just confused and childlike and really angry.
And yeah, and that is something they'll go on to explore further, especially in Thor Ragnarok. When the Hulk first comes out, he's essentially an infant, mentally. And later on, like we see in Thor Ragnarok, he's been there for 2 or 3 years, so he has the mentality of like a toddler. He's very misunderstood. He's very impulsive, very aggressive, very angry, but he's just a monster. He doesn't understand. And that's something that they absolutely explore further on, much later into the series and into the cinematic universe. In terms of the portrayal, I do enjoy the development that Bruce Banner has, where at the beginning he views Hulk as this disease, but later on in the series he realizes that there's more potential here. There's more than meets the eye with the big green giant.
It's a film about Bruce Banner learning that Hulk isn't so much a monster as a part of him that he can potentially control. And this shows up in the film's ending, where Hulk, despite being a mindless monster because of Bruce's control over him, refuses to kill Abomination and General Ross. He lets them live.
There was a deleted scene that a lot of people talk about. It was cut from the beginning of the film. It was a scene where essentially he was living in Alaska and he was essentially trying to commit suicide and shoot himself in the head with a gun, but the Hulk stopped him from doing that. That obviously was a deleted scene. I'm sure they cut it because it was probably a little dark for a comic book film, but we've seen comic book films be darker since then. But that scene goes to show right out the gate, like, he is desperate. Like, he doesn't see any other choice but to just end his own suffering, because the Hulk has just consumed everything of him. He can't live a normal life. He would rather die than suffer like that. And that just goes to show at the beginning, like you said, how his view on what the Hulk is in relation to himself versus what it is at the very end, where he's willingly turning into the Hulk and smiling because it is something that he potentially has control over.
Like we said, the Incredible Hulk is really weird looking back on because
Right, yeah.
its main character was recast. And I really like Mark Ruffalo's portrayal as the Hulk, and we'll get into that later, but I don't mind Edward Norton. He does a good job balancing a character who is constantly desperate and stressed out, but also showing him as being good at keeping it under wraps, someone who is trying very hard to not lose his cool. Like, I really like the idea of Bruce Banner studying meditation and martial arts to control his rage.
Yeah, I mean, that's just realistically what someone in that circumstance would do. Especially someone as intelligent as Bruce Banner is, like, finding ways to control the beast and take charge of it, even in desperate situations. And, I mean, I think that the portrayal of Hulk and Bruce Banner, especially, was very well in The Incredible Hulk. I also think, and this might be a hot take, unless you go, like, all the way with it, like, really far out there, really, there's not much else you could do with a solo Hulk film versus what they did here, you know?
Perhaps.
Like you said, like, the film is about Bruce Banner's dynamic with the Hulk, and by the end of the film, his dynamic completely changes from a desperately negative one to a very positive one, and I feel like, as far as the Hulk goes, I think he's a fairly one-note character in terms of that, you know? Like, I like the Hulk, I really do, but it's like, I also think that as a character, he works much better as a side character in someone else's film, you know, like in The Avengers or in Thor Ragnarok. In The Avengers, he's literally like, I believe he even said, he's like, we're a time bomb. Well, he's also a time bomb. He could just explode at any minute, and he does. So I think that dynamic of him, like, is he gonna Hulk out? Is he gonna turn evil? Are we gonna have to do, like, that sense of chaos that he brings? I feel like that is very effective in the Avengers, and his dynamic with Thor on Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok, which took the story a lot more in, like, a more out there and bizarre direction, which worked absolutely. But I think in terms of, like, a solo Hulk film, unless they go like World War Hulk or something really far out there, I don't think there's really much else they could do with his character in terms of a solo film besides what they did in this film. And I'm fine with only having one Hulk film, because they did what they were going to do, and he was an established character that worked very well, or at least I think very well, as it continued.
Talking about how Hulk works as part of a team, let's move on to the Avengers. As you said earlier, at the start of the Avengers, Hulk is hiding out in India. Black Widow gets sent to recruit him because he knows a lot about radiation and can track the magic thing that gives off radiation. Wink, wink. Not because he's a Hulk. Wink, wink. Bruce Banner goes to the SHIELD helicarrier. He hangs out with other Avengers, and a lot of the film is just Bruce Banner and Tony Stark hanging out in a lab doing science stuff together, being bros.
I think of all the Avengers, those two would form a more professional relationship. Although I do think that Tony has even proves himself as a little bit much for Bruce. He's literally pokes him with a prod to get him to Hulk out.
I think The Avengers is one of the absolute best MCU movies, and part of the reason is the cast of characters have really good chemistry with each other, and they work good as a group. And
Absolutely.
that is part of the reason I like Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. He is very good at bouncing off the other Avengers. He's so done in that movie. Like, every scene that Mark Ruffalo's in, he needs a hug. Like, he's so scared of losing it and going nuts, and everyone keeps putting him in these stressful situations, and he's just trying to deal with it.
Mark Ruffalo gives a very vulnerable performance, and it works very well. Even the scenes where he's hulking out, like when him and Black Widow are stuck and he's transforming, the emotion he brings in that scene, like it's very powerful.
As you were just discussing, as the film goes on, Loki blows up the SHIELD helicarrier because of his complicated plans. Bruce loses control. He almost kills Black Widow. He gets into a fight with Thor, and he gets chucked out.
I remember sitting in the theaters way back in 2012 watching that scene. Captain America and Iron Man are dealing with Loki and all that, and I remember like seeing Thor body slam into Hulk and they land in that like airplane wing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing like, oh shit. Because, like, it's about to go down with these guys.
And it does kind of go down. So at the start of the Avengers, Bruce mentions that in the time since The Incredible Hulk, he has learned to control Hulk. And there are a few times throughout the movie where people ask him how he does it. I'm pretty sure Iron Man at one point suggests that Bruce Banner just smokes a ton of weed to keep Hulk under control, which isn't true, but I do like the mental picture of it. That's why Hulk is green.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that was an improv by Robert Downey Jr. I guarantee it.
Perhaps. At the end of the movie, there's a big alien invasion in New York. All the Avengers show up. Then Bruce just comes in on this little moped and walks to the front of them, and Captain America says to him, "Now would be a good time for you to get angry." And then Bruce just turns to him and says, "That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry." And then as a giant alien monster flies down to kill the Avengers, he just, mid-sentence, just transforms into the Hulk and punches it hard enough to stop it dead in his tracks, because that is what he has done. He has started using Hulk as a weapon, because that's a good way to use the Hulk. It became a meme, but it is genuinely a good line. I'm always angry, because, let's be honest, Bruce Banner should be always angry. He has a lot to complain about.
Yeah, he has a right to be upset every once in a while.
But you can't lose control of your anger if you're always insanely pissed at everything. The final battle of the Avengers is great. If we ever review the Avengers, we'll go more into it, but we see some just great Hulk smashing. We see him take down a ship with Thor. We see him jumping from buildings. We see him just ragdoll the crap out of Loki. And then at the end of the movie, Bruce calms down with no effort, and he goes back into hiding because still a wanted fugitive.
No, I thought he goes to work with Tony Stark.
It's weird. They're unclear about that, and the films in general just kind of forget the whole wanted for 3 murders thing. But
Yeah.
I always interpreted that as him just hiding out at Iron Man's place.
He and Tony drive away together.
Yeah.
In terms of how the Hulk is portrayed in the Avengers, it's a good portrayal, not necessarily of Hulk, which, yes, it absolutely is. It portrays the very human side of Bruce Banner in relation to the world around him. In addition to that, it also portrays Hulk as this badass monster that is very useful in a battle scene. In terms of the Hulk, I feel like what that film does the best, more so than just the portrayal of the Hulk. The Hulk's dynamic and relationship with the world around him. You know, they brought him onto the Shield helicarrier under false pretenses. They said, "You are so gifted tracking gamma radiation, and that's what we need you for." But really, what it is okay, we need to create this team of superheroes and this big green monstrosity that can punch an entire alien like 1,000 times its size into oblivion without breaking a sweat. He's pretty useful on the team. In terms of how the Hulk is portrayed, what the Incredible Hulk did very well is portray the dynamic between Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk versus where the Avengers did is the Hulk's dynamic with the rest of the Avengers and the government and just kind of the people of the world, you know?
Yeah. I said earlier I thought there was only one good Hulk film in the MCU. That may have been a bit harsh, but I do think The Avengers is the best portrayal of the Hulk in the MCU.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely, I agree with you.
One small note before we go onward, because it will be important for a discussion of the next major Hulk film. There are, as we mentioned, some seeds of mistrust placed on Hulk. They bring him into the Avengers under false pretenses. It's actually shown that Nick Fury has a massive cage to put the Hulk in case anything goes wrong, which him mentioning to Bruce Banner kind of makes Bruce Banner get a little angry.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind as we go on to Avengers Age of Ultron. I mean, in between them was Iron Man 3, where there was a cameo of Hulk just hanging out with Iron Man, which I like the idea of superheroes hanging out with each other between movies.
That's the thing I feel like that I like about the Avengers versus like other superhero teams, like, well, predominantly like the Justice League. In terms of the Justice League, like, yeah, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, like, they're all friends, but like they're not super close.
Friends.
They're work friends, but like the rest of them are just like, all right, we'll team up if necessary. But like the Avengers, they're like friends. That's what I like about them.
I agree with you on it's great that the Avengers are friends. I don't know if that's super accurate on the Justice League, because there are definitely some strong friendships within the Justice League, like, for instance, Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, or Green Lantern and the Flash.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the main 7, like the new 52-7 versions of them. Enough. But like, yeah, you're right. Green Lantern and Flash are better friends. Batman and Superman, Superman and Wonder Woman, like they have their dynamics. But in terms of like them as a group, you very rarely see them like hanging out as friends. You know, they don't get shawarma. They don't get shawarma together. Anyway, I still like the Justice League. Don't get me wrong, whatsoever. I think they're great characters.
They don't, after killing a bunch of Nazis, just get drunk and try to lift Thor's hammer, and then evil robot shows up. Speaking of that random non sequitur, Avengers Age of Ultron. At the start of it, Hulk's working with the Avengers again. They have him as their secret weapon. Don't use him always, but when the going gets tough, like they're having some trouble with Hydra, just have him burst out and kill everyone.
Absolutely.
And they actually show that Bruce Banner, who is a gentle, sensitive guy, he's not a bloodthirsty warrior like Thor, isn't super into his role as Hulk, just being this hammer to drop down on people. Like, there's a scene after Hulk destroys a base full of Nazis where Thor's like, "It was glorious! Their screams will echo forever!" And then it just cuts to Bruce Banner putting his face in his hands, and then Thor sheepishly is like, screams of joy. But yeah, Hulk, with his good bro Iron Man, creates Ultron, which they normally portray Ultron's creation as being more on Iron Man, which,
right,
I mean, is fair because the creating Ultron is very much an Iron Man thing to do, and it's part of his character arc. But yeah, right. Hulk co-creates Ultron.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And Ultron does a bunch of evil stuff. During their hunting for Ultron, it brings them to Johannesburg, South Africa, where Scarlet Witch, who's working for Ultron at that part, does a bit of magic on Hulk, makes him lose control and smash stuff, and we get to see Hulk fight Iron Man, and it's cool.
What happens next is Ultron essentially tracks them down and starts messing with them every which way they can, and the Avengers are forced to go into hiding, where they end up on Hawkeye's family's house on a farm, where they have to recollect themselves and prepare for the upcoming battle against Ultron.
And eventually they get into this final battle. They smash a bunch of Ultron drones together as a team. But at the end of the battle, Hulk gets in a plane and he just flies away. Doesn't tell anyone who he's going.
Right.
And that happens because of the core development Hulk goes through in the second Avengers movie. Like I touched on it briefly earlier. But there's a big theme of distrust Hulk has towards the other Avengers that goes on in this movie. They use him as a weapon against Hydra. He loses control of himself in Johannesburg because of Scarlet Witch, and you just see after he gets knocked out of the funk, him looking around horrified at himself. In this film, he starts a relationship with Black Widow, which we'll get to in a minute. But at the end, like, he doesn't want to turn into Hulk, but she just shoves him off a cliff so he'll power up.
Right.
In Age of Ultron, you really get the sense that Bruce Banner doesn't want to be a superhero anymore and just wants to retire and is being forced into it by the other Avengers. So, of course, at the end of the film, he just leaves. He gets in a jet and flies away.
The relationship between him and Black Widow is often a point of criticism of that film. This is considered the weakest of the Avengers films, and for good reason. I agree with them. I do believe that of the Avengers films, they're all really solid. It's just Age of Ultron itself is definitely the weakest. In terms of the relationship, like you said, well, out of nowhere, Natasha Romanoff just starts flirting with him and inciting this relationship between the two of them. And it's met with him obviously having some hesitation. He's saying, I can't be in a relationship, I can't have these attachments because of what the Hulk is. And
Yeah, because call back to Incredible Hulk, where they said the Hulk can't have sex without turning into the Hulk, which is, okay, that's a detail you have canon now.
yeah, poor guy. Anyway,
Also, it's bad biology because it says that if he had sex, it would raise his heart rate too much. But, like, we see him doing other physical activities, like running and stuff, that doesn't have that problem, but whatever.
right, yeah. And it's very interesting because of the choice to have a relationship with Black Widow, like you said, this seed of distrust between all of them. It's like she has some convincing arguments to make when it comes to why she chooses to pursue him as a love interest, but as a character, she's the most mysterious of all of them. She's a secret agent. She's a spy with a very tragic, mysterious, and also dangerous past that, as we see with the upcoming Black Widow film, is coming back to haunt her. But he begins to distrust the fellow Avengers, and the person who's trying to keep him in the relationship, in the team, is the one that he theoretically should mistrust the most, or does mistrust the most, because she has the most secrets to hide. It's often a point of criticism, the relationship, and I do agree. I do think it was very out of left field. I remember watching that, like, what the fuck? Them? Really? On the surface, it felt like it was just a relationship to have a relationship, but it does thematically fit better into the Hulk's development of that story. And I did like the idea that Bruce Banner does still have some control over the Hulk in that he understands that what's best for him is to just leave and make his own way. And as we find out later, he shot himself into space and went
Yeah,
through a wormhole. And
somehow. One more thing on the relationship between Bruce and Natasha. I don't actually mind it that much. I'm
Mhm.
mostly neutral to it.
Yeah.
The actors have good chemistry, but the film doesn't really give the relationship enough time for me to care about. It's just weird because they also had a really big relationship for him and
Right.
Betty Ross in The Incredible Hulk, and then they kind of forgot she exists.
One more thing that I am also a really big fan of that this film did do with the Hulk is they gave him sort of a trigger to calm him down and turn back into Bruce Banner with the help of the other Avengers. You know, hey, big guy, sun's getting real low. They essentially put the Hulk in a trance with words and sort of physical actions that turns the Hulk back to Bruce Banner. Like I said with the Incredible Hulk, this idea that realistically, in a situation like that, someone is not going to just be like, "Well, just gonna have to deal with this." Not like, no, they're gonna try to learn new ways of controlling their heart rates and controlling their breathing. That's why he learns all these new meditation and martial arts techniques. With this film, it's the other Avengers who are like, okay, to prevent the Hulk from getting out of control, we're going to bring this psychological trigger with him. Again, like realistically, that's something that would naturally happen. And I'm glad that that was something they did because that was a very interesting development of the Hulk.
Unfortunately, ways to make him stop being Hulk don't always work, especially when Hulk actively fights against being turned back for 2 years after flying a plane into space and ending up through a wormhole on an alien planet where he later runs into Thor and Loki because coincidence. It's far-fetched that he appears in Thor Ragnarok, but it is such a great moment. Like, he's a friend from work! Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
disappointed that it was revealed when the film was first announced it would be half adapting Planet Hulk, and also they showed it in all the trailers, because that would
Yeah.
have been such a scene to see in theaters.
So that was a very nice segue into Thor Ragnarok. Something that I do like, to continue on with what you just said, how it's all coincidental that they did that. One thing that I always liked about Thor Ragnarok, because I don't love the movie, a lot of people do love the movie. I don't, just for I have my reasons, but one thing that I always appreciated it because I believe it came out 2017,
Yeah,
I think. Yeah,
2017.
2017. That year also came out Spider-Man: Homecoming and Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Basically, to set the scene, the very next year, Avengers: Infinity War was being released, and it was the culmination of the previous 10 years of Marvel. And really, I think Guardians of the Galaxy is they're so far removed from like the main series Avengers films that like didn't really affect it too much. But I do like Spider Man Homecoming, but one of the biggest criticisms I have is that there's really no weight to it. There's not much at stake. It just feels like it's a small movie in between two big movies, because for all intents and purposes, it is. Like, Spider Man was literally added almost last minute into Captain America Civil War, and the next year they're giving him his own movie. It just seems like there really wasn't much at stake. They were just like, oh, let's just make a Spider-Man movie. It just feels like this is a fun ride, but come on, let's get to Infinity War already. Come on, like that's the movie we're really waiting for. The thing that Thor Ragnarok does, they fully embrace that. They're like, look, we know the last two Thor movies weren't crazy with fans. We know you want to see Infinity War. Let's just have a damn good time. It fully embraces the fun aspect of the series, like having all these throwbacks, like when Hulk jumps out of the plane, which is an homage to what he did in The Incredible Hulk. The only difference being in The Incredible Hulk, right before he landed, he transformed into the Hulk, whereas in Thor Ragnarok, he just splats on the bridge. It's just there's little moments like that, and it's just that film. I always give Thor Ragnarok credit. Like, yes, it's very coincidental, but come on, let's just have some fun, okay?
And it is fun. It's fun seeing Thor and Hulk have a rematch. And anyway, after Thor and Hulk's fight in this gladiator arena, we just get to see Thor and Hulk chilling out. It's weird. We see Hulk be calm because he's been Hulk for 2 years, keeping himself from turning back into Banner, and he's actually grown as a person. He's less angry, he's calmer, he's more mature.
Right,
He's still
exactly.
Hulk. He's still like smashing big monster, but he's starting to become a person. You touched on it earlier. The portrayal in Ragnarok of Hulk is that he's just grown up because he's been Hulk for 2 years, as opposed to just turning into Hulk for a few hours every few months, and Hulk never getting a chance to really establish himself as a person.
Right, exactly.
Partway through Ragnarok, Thor ends up getting Hulk to watch the sun's getting real low tape, and he turns back into Banner, who has not remembered the past 2 years, and we get some great Mark Ruffalo being a comedy actor stuff with him just bouncing off Chris Hemsworth as Bruce Banner being a guy on an alien planet who doesn't know what's going on. Anyway, at the end of the film, Bruce Banner turns back into Hulk to save the day, even though he acknowledges that might have some trouble turning back to Bruce Banner, but it's fine, gotta save the day. Bruce Banner's a good person. After Hulk gets to beat up a giant god wolf, the film ends with Thor and Hulk going on with the Asgardians to have new adventures. And then 5 minutes later, Thanos shows up.
How is Hulk's portrayal in this film?
It's probably the film that portrays Hulk as a monster the least, except for maybe Endgame, and we'll get to that. It portrays Hulk, the persona of Hulk, as finally starting to become his own person, and that person is this battle-loving, big, tough champion.
Right.
And it's great.
Like he's finally found a home, essentially.
Yeah, and he's finally starting to be comic accurate Hulk, with Hulk not just being a monster, being his own person, kind of.
I mean, honestly, this film definitely takes a lot of creative liberties with the stories they're pulling from, like the Planet Hulk. This takes a lot of liberties.
Hulk becomes a gladiator and fights against a cosmic Marvel character on a planet called Sakaar. And that's all it has from Planet Hulk.
In terms of being a portrayal of the Hulk, it's definitely like its own thing. The Hulk isn't predominantly known for being like a 3-year-old. It's good, don't get me wrong, it is good for what they're going for, but like in terms of who the Hulk is as a character, it's doing its own thing.
I'm pretty sure Hulk talks more in this film than in every other MCU movie combined. But his awesome bromance with Thor comes to an end, because Thanos shows up and beats the crap out of Hulk to show that he's strong.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hulk turns back into Banner, and doesn't turn back into Hulk for the rest of Infinity War.
The interesting thing is, Kevin Feige went to Mark Ruffalo right as like they were developing the script for Thor Ragnarok, and he said, listen, because Universal owns the distribution rights to the Hulk, we're not going to be able to make a solo Hulk film. But if we were going to, what would you like us to do? And essentially, with the help of Mark Ruffalo, they developed sort of a 3-film arc. It was basically their ideas for what they would do with a solo Hulk film, starting with Thor Ragnarok, continuing in Avengers Infinity War, and culminating in Avengers Endgame. The Hulk's arc amongst those 3 films was conceptualized as one continuous story for the development of the Hulk. It was strange because, like, all 3 films are so different from each other, from, like, story, tone, and also where the Hulk is in his story. In Thor Ragnarok, he's in Planet Hulk, and he's this gladiator with the mentality of a toddler, and it's fun and silly. And then in Infinity War, he's like this really anxious, depressed, scared guy who can't turn back into the Hulk.
Yeah, he can't turn into Hulk, so he wears an Iron Man armor and
the Hulkbuster armor. In Endgame, we'll get into this a little more later, but he finds a way to merge his mind with the body of the Hulk, and so it's very strange, because if they did conceptualize it as the Hulk story, as one continuous arc, they really changed it up to fit within the 3 completely different films. So
yeah, I've heard the same thing of those 3 being a Hulk trilogy, but they're so different in their portrayals of the Hulk. I don't like Hulk's portrayal in the last 2 Avengers movies. I think they're the weakest films in terms of their portrayal of Hulk.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's just barely in them. I like Hulk being overwhelmed by Thanos to establish Thanos being good. That's a good scene. Yes. It's an overdone trope, war effect, yada yada, but it's good.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's the last time we see Hulk, like really see Hulk, is him getting beat down. And Hulk doesn't come back, and a lot of people say it's because he's scared of Thanos. That's not true. According to the Russo brothers, it's because he doesn't like being used as a weapon by Bruce Banner, which is interesting.
Right. But they didn't really explore that much, because Hulk's barely in it.
Here's the thing. There's some cutscenes from the climax of Infinity War, and there's a toy based off them. That's how we first found out about them, even before the DVD was out. In the finished film, Bruce Banner kills one of Thanos' minions using the Hulkbuster armor, which is fine. But the original plan was, in the final battle, Hulk and Bruce Banner start talking to each other. Hulk says he doesn't want to be used by Banner, so Banner proposes an idea, and they fuse together then. And we get Professor Hulk bursting out of the Hulkbuster armor, beating down Obsidian with Hulk's strength and Banner's intelligence. And that is when we get Professor Hulk, as opposed to it being off-screen in between films. Like, I like this as an end to the arc of Hulk. first he feared Hulk, then he learned to control Hulk, then he started treating Hulk as another, and now he's finally treating Hulk as a part of him. I like that as a resolution to his arc, but it happens off screen between films.
That is definitely one of the weakest parts of it, and you're right. I agree. And there's a lot of people who say like that is one of the weaker elements of Endgame is that it was so weird. Like I don't hate what they did with the Hulk by any stretch of the imagination in Avengers Endgame, but I do agree. I do think that that was a little weird. It was very sudden, like you said, but admittedly, I don't know exactly how else they would have done it.
Apparently, they cut Professor Hulk debuting in Infinity War because of pacing, which I
Yeah.
can understand, but I don't really know. I don't know how it would have been edited or if it couldn't have been edited to be good, but whatever.
Yeah, well, that film in general is just very tightly edited. And when you were explaining it, in my head, I was kind of thinking like that could have like broken that scene up a little bit. It would have taken too much time. I kind of get why they didn't do it then, but they could have done it in Endgame. But like again, that film is very long and very tightly edited. They would have had to have devoted so much time to explaining like, ooh, this is what Bruce Banner's gonna do, and then this is what's gonna turn to the Hulk, and it's like,
There is a place in Endgame I think they could have had Professor Hulk be introduced.
oh yeah, what was that?
When Hulk meets with the Ancient One, Doctor Strange's mentor, who pushes his soul out of his body and he gets an out-of-body experience while she talks to him,
Yeah.
that could have been a place to have had the merge happen. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. It was a very interesting idea, merging Bruce Banner and the Hulk as one character, and it fits thematically, and it fits in the story, but, like, in execution, really, in order for that to happen, Hulk really had to be one of the more central focuses of the film, and they just could not do that based on the requirements of the story. I like the idea of what they did, I just don't like the execution. And the execution has much to be desired.
The end of Endgame does it gives a couple interesting things with Hulk I'd like to talk about briefly. First off, Hulk's the one that does the snapping and like brings all the billions and billions of people back to life, and you get a shot of him saying like, it's like I was made for this, because like Hulk is the only one tough enough to do that, and even then he loses an arm like bringing people back to life. And I do like that. I do like Hulk's arc ending with him basically using his strength not for destruction, but to save people.
Yeah.
And immediately after that, the Avengers base gets blown up, a bunch of people end up underground, and Hulk holds up the whole base to save them, which is tying in what is perhaps the most famous Hulk moment in the comics, him hulking up a mountain, and I don't know. I expected it to be more, because that's like the Hulk moment in the comics, and they don't really focus on it at all.
Right, yeah.
And he doesn't do crap in the final battle.
An interesting thing about when Hulk snaps and it brings everybody back, Thor is trying to convince everybody to let him do it. I've heard a lot of people saying, oh yeah, they should have done it because in the comics at one point Thor loses an arm and he has like a piece of the Destroyer armor from the first Thor movie, like as his arm. But I prefer that Hulk does it because he's this guy who his entire life he's been afflicted with this quote-unquote disease. And now he gains mastery of it and he's in a place where he's happy and he's fulfilled. And not only is he using that power to create as opposed to destroy, but also there's some sense of poetic irony in the idea that he lost an arm. But also in terms of Thor's development and Thor's character arc in that film, if Thor had done it, that would have betrayed his entire arc. The point of Thor's arc in Endgame is doing what you can despite fear of failure and the anxiety of your past. He has the ability to do this, and he has to find that within himself again. And I just feel like, oh yeah, him being the one to snap back, I just feel like that betrays that, versus him actively like finding it within himself to fight Thanos and help his team fight for what's right.
Yeah, no. Hulk doing the snap, that's a good end to his character.
And in terms of what they're going to potentially do with the future,
they're making a She-Hulk TV show. Maybe it'll be good.
But beyond that, Mark Ruffalo has expressed interest in appearing in a Young Avengers film, or the New Avengers, or whatever, with like the teenagers, as like a mentor figure to them.
I mean, I do think just looking at how the Avengers were at the end of the last one, Makes sense for him and maybe War Machine
Yeah.
to be mentors to the new team because they're kind of the only team members left. I mean, I guess there's Thor, but he's in space. There's Scarlet Witch, but she's dealing with some stuff.
Yeah.
I like the idea of Hulk missing an arm being as a mentor figure now.
To the next generation.
Either to the next generation or to his cousin, She-Hulk.
And if you look at it, War Machine, he lost the use of his legs and without the help of Stark Tech. And Hulk lost the use of his arm, and I'm sure he could find a way to fix that. They created time travel technology. I'm sure they could find a way to kind of at least make Hulk's arm semi-usable, you know? So it's like these two guys who are like, we've fought and we've bled and we've lost a lot.
We're both over 50 at this point.
Yeah. Together they could be good mentors, like you said.
Also, you mentioned Hulk invented time travel. I did complain a lot about Endgame and Infinity War 2 for being bad Hulk films. They do have good scenes of Mark Ruffalo just being Mark Ruffalo that I enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not saying that those films are bad in any way.
No, because it's the main problem the Marvel crossovers have is that they don't have time to focus on all the characters. Like Hawkeye in the first Avengers, Thor in the second one, most of the team in Civil War, basically anyone who wasn't Iron Man, Captain America, or Thor in the third and fourth ones.
In terms of how the Hulk has been portrayed in the grand scheme of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, how accurately or how well has he been portrayed, do you think?
How well and how accurate are different questions. Because Hulk's main role in the MCU, because of the whole Universal crap, is a part of the Avengers, which isn't really a thing in the comics. Like, he was a founding member in the comics, but left after a few issues and only rejoined them after 2012 as a tie-in to the movie.
Right.
Hulk isn't traditionally like a major Avenger in the comics, but that is his role. He isn't traveling around fighting gamma monsters and dealing with his split personality. It's mostly how he relates to the team for better or for worse.
Right, exactly.
And I really like that. I really enjoy Bruce Banner as a character in the MCU. Going through and like analyzing his character arc in each film, they do something different with him in each film while still having it be like a consistent arc, even if it gets a bit messy towards the end.
The Incredible Hulk, though being very detached from the rest of the MCU, I think is far from a perfect film, far from a great film. But in terms of the dynamic between Bruce Banner and the Hulk, this sort of Jekyll and Hyde scenario that they got going on, in terms of that was a very good portrayal then. Like you said, the rest of the series is predominantly focuses on Bruce Banner and Hulk's dynamics between the rest of the Avengers. But like you said, and I think this is kind of segues more so into a part of this discussion I wanted to have, sort of they kind of seem to forget this idea that Hulk is a wanted fugitive.
Going back to that, he killed 3 dudes and was on run from the U.S. military.
Right.
And he destroyed Harlem and Johannesburg.
Right.
Like, how is he not in prison? Like, I mean, they have more pressing things to go on and pardon him because he saved New York City from aliens, yada, yada. But they don't even address it.
Right. Even in Civil War, when Thunderbolt Ross comes back, now he's a...
he's the Secretary of State.
He's the Secretary
right?
of State, yeah. Even when he comes back, at no point does he even say, oh yeah, you guys were... Does he say?
He refers to the Avengers as misplacing 2 nukes because they don't know where Thor or Hulk are. But he doesn't acknowledge that he created Hulk and Abomination. Oopsie daisy.
And at no point does he mention, he goes, yeah, I was hunting him for years. Or at least from what I recall. Again, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I don't recall him ever saying, yeah, like you, Tony Stark, were harboring a fugitive that I was hunting down personally for years. So... you and I have talked about this. The portrayal of Hulk in the 2010 era Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, that was a very good portrayal of not so much Bruce Banner because...
he's barely in it. He's like Hulk 24/7, but
yeah.
It has good characterization for the Hulk.
When the Avengers first form against the villain Graviton, right as soon as they finish him, the Hulkbuster units hone in around them, and Hulk is about to like fight all of them. But then the rest of the Avengers stand in front of him and they're saying, no, We're not. He's a hero. We're not going to let you take him. He's with us now.
They never do that in the films.
No, like so, and even later on when they introduced the Red Hulk, who is Thunderbolt Ross.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler. It's a comic book that's been there for a while, but point is, there is more of a dynamic between him and the Hulkbuster units and him as a fugitive, and the Avengers are essentially keeping him in check. I do think that the MCU has treated Hulk pretty well. It has its strengths, has its weaknesses. As we mentioned, Infinity War and Endgame are kind of iffy on their portrayal. They kind of forget some plot lines with him being this wanted fugitive. They're very integral to the Hulk as a character.
Speaking of forgetting plot lines, what are your thoughts on like how they deal with? Obviously, they forget about Betty Ross, but I don't really care because I have no love for anything in that film. But Hulk and Black Widow being in a relationship was such a big part of the second Avengers movie.
Yeah.
It gets referenced in Thor with Thor trying to pretend to be Black Widow and calm Hulk down with the, hey there, bud, sun's getting real low. Oh, you punched me.
Yeah.
It's interesting, they never really fully go back to that relationship or even acknowledge it. They give like a knowing look in Infinity War, but
Yeah.
the film's too fast-paced to really do it.
Yeah.
And in Endgame, he reacts the worst to Black Widow's death, perhaps even more than Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And at the end, there's a nice moment where he mentions that he tried to bring her back when he had the gauntlet, but couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's like just a nice thing that I like.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like Marvel was like, okay, well, the fans don't really like that, but it's already pre-established, so it would make sense that they would react this way. One thing that was always very interesting to me is they really toned down the power and the strength of the Hulk in the MCU. Like, in the comics, the Hulk is ridiculously OP.
Yeah, like we mentioned, one of the most iconic Hulk moments is him lifting a mountain.
Yeah.
And his max feats in the comics during World War Hulk after his family was murdered, and that's the strongest and angriest he's ever been in the comics. He was capable of moving continents and maybe even smashing planets in half.
Exactly.
And he can't do that in the MCU, I don't think.
No, because Hulk is so strong, he's able to like jump for like several miles in like a single bound, you know? But like in the films they gave him more like make the laws of physics apply more so to him, which is interesting.
Which is interesting because the sheer concept of Hulk is just crapping all over the idea of conservation of mass, but whatever.
Exactly. In the MCU, they really toned down the Hulk in order to make him better fit into the rest of the MCU, because they got to have some continuity between all the Avengers and their strengths, and they can't let it be too overpowered. But I do think that there was one thing that happened in Endgame. It was right before Tony snapped and, spoilers, defeated all them and gave his life. When Captain Marvel is trying to wrestle the gauntlet out of Thanos' hands, and he headbutts her, and she just doesn't flinch at all. That, to me personally, signifies that Marvel is like, okay, we know we toned down the power of the Hulk, but now we are willing to go, like, super powerful with our characters.
Yeah, and it isn't just Captain Marvel. In the most recent couple of films, they've also had Thor go insanely powerful, and in Infinity War finally gave Doctor Strange just this massive spell list.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm glad that the MCU is willing to have characters be strong.
In terms of the dynamic with Hulk with Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk did that very well. In terms of the Hulk's dynamic with the rest of the Avengers, that was done very well with the first and second Avengers film. Thor Ragnarok, its portrayal of Hulk is really its own contained thing, but Infinity War and Endgame, they kind of lose it a little bit. We like the idea, but in terms of like the actual execution, it has a bit to be desired. But so in terms of the character of the Hulk, overall, I'd say it was a pretty solid portrayal of him as a character. In terms of like his power, they did very much so tone him down, because Hulk in the comics is like, he's like the most powerful one of all of them, the strongest of all of them, and they just kind of, He is, absolutely, but they really toned down his power to make sense in the cinematic universe. But in terms of what they're going for in the future, they're going very powerful with their characters like Captain Marvel, like Thor. Rumors that Adam Warlock is going to be in the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy film. And also in terms of the future, they're going to continue Professor Hulk. His involvement with the Avengers is going to be more of a mentorship role, and I'm interested to see how they're going to continue Hulk's story, how long they're going to continue Hulk's story, and overall, I think it was a pretty solid portrayal, though they had some missteps here and there.
Yeah, overall, I think it's pretty good. Speaking of things that are pretty good, stopping
Yeah.
eventually. That was a bad way to end this. But whatever. Riley, where can they find you?
You can all find me on TikTok and Instagram at Riley James Thorpe, and you can find me on YouTube at Riley Thorpe, where you can find my latest short film, Silence of the Karens.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
Admittedly.
I tried, yeah. It's a horror comedy parody, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Also, check out The First Mag Train Out of Cleveland and Other Short Stories, available now on Amazon. It's a collection of sci-fi short stories I wrote. The ebook's only a few bucks. Go buy it. We'll be back next week, assuming the sun doesn't go too low. Next episode, we'll be talking about Captain America. Not Captain America the First Avenger. We're going to be talking about the film called Captain America.
From 1990.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
You know, when you and I were brainstorming, real quick, when you and I were brainstorming ideas for what we would talk about on this podcast, and you started throwing out, like, ideas like Catwoman and Batman and Robin and the Fan Four Stick and this film, Captain America, I was excited, but I was also kind of struck with this feeling of, oh shit, that means I like actually have to watch these movies. But yeah,
I've seen the last 3 movies we reviewed already.
Yeah.
Never seen this one. Just heard that it's the worst of the 6 live-action Captain America movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are 2 other Captain America movies before the first Avenger, and we'll talk about them eventually, probably.
There was actually 3, I believe. One from the 40s and 2 in the 80s.
Oh, right. There's the 40s serial.
Yeah, where the guy died. The actor died like
Wait, he died while they were filming?
a couple weeks after, or you can.
We'll save it for next episode, but a dude died while filming a Captain America movie?
The guy who was playing Captain America, he wasn't exactly like per se like in shape exactly, but like he had a heart attack a couple weeks later, and it was attributed to the fact that the physicality necessary to portray Captain America in that serial was so physically straining on him that his heart gave out.
Well, I don't think anyone died in the filming of the one we're watching next week.
Unfortunately not.
Anyway, as always, I'm Casey Jarmes.
And I'm Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head about it, especially not to Thor.